Hurricane Erika has slowed and strengthened in its trip across the Atlantic and is bringing some gusty thunderstorms to some of the Caribbean islands. Good morning and welcome to WeatherScope. I'm Kristen Dodd. Mark Mancuso is standing by in our forecast center with the latest. Mark?
Well, thank you very much, Kristen. And Hurricane Erika is just about stationary at this hour. It really slowed down overnight, and it is still a very well organized storm. If anything, it has become stronger overnight and early this morning, and it's buffeting the Virgin Islands with some squally weather. Tropical storm force winds in gusts, but the main area of high winds has stayed well to the northeast. Let's give you the latest from the Hurricane Center. That's just in as of 11 a.m. Atlantic Standard Time. 20.2 north, 63.2 west. That's very little change from our last coordinates. Movement just about stationary, winds 85. And that's right near the center of circulation, sustained winds of 85 miles an hour, and pressure 976 millibars. Hurricane hunters were investigating overnight and early this morning, did find pressures dropping some, signs of our storm getting a little stronger. Hurricane watches continue in effect for Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. We have been getting tropical storm force winds in gusts as the squalls, the spiral bands of rain have been spinning around the center of circulation, but the sustained tropical storm force winds 39 miles an hour or greater have remained to the north of the Virgin Islands, at least from the reports that we have, and the hurricane force winds extending out about 85 miles or so to the north and northeast of the center of circulation. Visible satellite picture this morning shows us our well-defined and well-organized storm there, but notice it has moved very little during the past several frames, and as we close into the picture here, we can show you our center of circulation, and as this goes into motion, let's see how much it really moves. And as you can see, very little movement. Now, this little band right here, that's where we have the concentration of our tropical storm force winds and hurricane force winds. But notice that that remains to the north of the Virgin Islands, Anguilla, St. Martin, and here you can see the British Virgin Islands, and there's St. Thomas and St. Croix. And notice St. Croix has been pretty much missing out on the bands that have been spiraling around our center of circulation. Here's Puerto Rico, and here's San Juan right here, and you can see San Juan, we've been missing out on most of the squally weather as well. Here's a look at the latest radar. Again, keep in mind our center of circulation is up and through here, so you see your bands of rain coming around through there. Here's St. Thomas right here, and this is Anguilla and St. Martin, where we've seen the heavy showers this morning. We have a Doppler radar for you too, and you can see this band of rain right here, some pretty intense squalls. That's all spinning around to the south and southwest, and in these bands here, winds could gust up to 50 miles an hour. Now with the slow movement of this storm, there will be the potential for these rain bands to deposit an awful lot of water. And then through here, for example, right over St. Thomas and the British Virgin Islands, Tortola there, St. John, estimates of anywhere from 3 to 6 inches of rain. So the potential for flash flooding very high here, and also some pounding surf, seas building 10 to 15 feet offshore there. And residents of these islands are reminded to stay away from the beaches there, because those large swells could come crashing on in there, and they will cause an awful lot of beach erosion. Here you can see the upper level winds, strong west and southwesterly winds, but they're pretty far away from our storm. The storm's kind of sitting underneath an upper ridge, so it's just going to take its sweet time moving out. Eventually, though, it is forecast to turn north and northeastward, so let's hope that pans on out. But for the time being, in the Virgin Islands and eastern Puerto Rico, in for some bursts of heavy rain and some squally weather. And, of course, the beach erosion.
It's only $19.95. Tired of rolled-up newspapers? Get a bug stick. But wait, during this special introductory offer, we'll include a $5 factory rebate. That's right, it's only $14.95 with rebate. To order, call 1-800-257-5700.
This is your local forecast. Weather information you can plan on, because we show it on the 8s of every hour. Local on the 8s on the Weather Channel. Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
Time now for a tropical update. Glad you're with us here on the Weather Channel. Let's take a look at the latest on Hurricane Erika, which according to the 2 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center placed the center of Erika, center of the circulation of the hurricane, at 20.5 north, longitude 63.2 west, about 230 miles northeast of San Juan, Puerto Rico. And maximum sustained winds 85 miles per hour, drifting toward the north. Good news, of course, for the islands. The southwestern portion of the hurricane circulation has been brushing Puerto Rico and the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, and should it continue that drift toward the north, that will begin to reduce the effects of the hurricane in those regions. Central pressure estimated to be 976 millibars, and in light of that position and that strength, hurricane watches continue in effect for Puerto Rico and the U.S. and British Virgin Islands. If the motion of the storm towards the north should continue, then the hurricane watches could be dropped later today or tonight for those areas where they are now in effect. You can see here the wind profile, the profile showing you where the strongest winds are. Hurricane.
We'll have the Monday forecast in just a few minutes, but first, let's go to Dan Atkinson in the Forecast Center for the latest on Erika. Dan?
And thank you very much, Bob. Air Force hurricane hunters have confirmed that Hurricane Erika has strengthened considerably during the day, and maximum sustained winds now 105 miles per hour with higher gusts. Here's a look at the latest coordinates according to the 5 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center. At 5 p.m., the center of Hurricane Erika estimated to be near latitude 21 north, longitude 63.4 west. That put the center about 245 miles northeast of San Juan, Puerto Rico. Again, maximum sustained winds 105 miles per hour, and the motion still generally toward the north, actually north-northwest about 6 miles per hour. And central pressure, minimum central pressure, estimated to be about 964 millibars. This makes Erika a Category 2 hurricane, and joining us here in the Forecast Center to talk more about what's happening and what's likely to happen is our tropical coordinator, Declan Cannon. Declan, this is a storm that fortunately is moving away from the islands as it gets stronger.
That's right, Dan, and that 964 millibars, that's actually about a 12 millibar drop in the last 9 hours. So yeah, it is significant. The storm definitely has intensified, as is evident now with the maximum sustained winds having been increased to 105, and we know from reconnaissance that was coming in from this morning and then to this afternoon that not only did the pressure drop significantly, but the flight level winds, which in this case were about 5,000 feet above the ocean, increased quite a bit as well. So it's undergone its intensification, and as you mentioned, it may continue to intensify as we head into this evening, but thankfully, as we look at the radius of tropical storm and hurricane force winds, we've noticed that we still have that same relationship. The strongest winds primarily northeast of the center, and that, at least for the folks in the islands, is good news. In fact, southwest of the actual hurricane center, those hurricane force winds extend about 50 miles, so not very far, and that's good. It's primarily a concern of rain and perhaps the coastal flooding that may occur with the departing of the hurricane. We still have that problem. These swells that are generated by the hurricane can actually travel out in all distances, and we know from history that swells can travel an incredibly long distance across the ocean surface. So those swells may still be arriving on the coast of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands for a couple of days.
And even now, coastal flood warnings are in effect for the western, northern, and eastern coasts of Puerto Rico, as well as for coastal sections of the U.S. Virgin Islands. Incidentally, hurricane watches have been dropped for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico as a consequence of the northward movement of Hurricane Erika. Let's take a look at precipitation. On the other source, we have a view of radar out of San Juan, and we will see, there we go. Tell us what we're seeing there with those spiral rain bands, Declan.
Well, you know, radar has estimated so far during the course of the hurricane that we've had about 4 to 6 inches of rain across the U.S., parts of the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, but Puerto Rico really has been spared significant rain as far as we know. The northeastern part of the island perhaps catching some rain today. Down here on the south side, very little precipitation, if any at all. In fact, south of the mountains down around Ponce, temperature at least 100 degrees, if not 101 or 102 today.
Getting those winds coming over the mountains and compressing and heating, right?
That's right, and it's not uncommon as you get a certain distance away from a hurricane center that you will have an area of sinking air, which can actually tend to increase some of the surface heating. But for the folks here in the British and U.S. Virgin Islands, the showers and thunder showers will continue this afternoon. And a good point that you brought up earlier today is, despite the fact that the hurricane is moving away, sometimes, and we may see this on the satellite view tomorrow, the visible imagery, we'll get these little tails, these bands of converging air where we can have some pretty high rainfall totals within a small area. Almost impossible to predict where that would be, let's say, tomorrow, but we do know that these departing tropical systems can leave behind multiple bands of showers and storms, and they can be quite intense.
So there will be a flash flood potential in the northeastern Caribbean there even into Tuesday.
It's possible. Yes. We'll be watching for that.
Thank you, Declan. That's the latest on Hurricane Erika, and now with what's happening elsewhere across the United States.
Honda generators. Power when you need it. Let's take a look at some of the information from late this afternoon, and as of 5 p.m. you can see there have been significant changes in Hurricane Erika, changes, let's say, compared to this morning's information. For one, north-northwestbound at 6 miles per hour. That's an increase in forward speed. A definite change here. The maximum sustained winds have been increased to 105 miles per hour, and the reconnaissance did indicate today a fairly significant increase in the flight level winds, and the lowering of the pressure was fairly dramatic in the last 9 hours, about 12 millibars. So a fairly significant strengthening of the hurricane. Thankfully, it is moving farther away from the islands, but we still have the generation of the high waves, the swells, that will be traveling outwards at great distances from the hurricane, and that could be a continued concern for residents in the areas here on the north edge of the islands, north-facing coasts of Puerto Rico, and even into the U.S. and Virgin Islands, Vieques, Culebra, east of Puerto Rico. Some coastal flooding is possible as these large waves, which are generated by the presence of our hurricane, continue to slide out towards the southwest and the south. We haven't seen a lot of rain, in fact hardly any at all in Puerto Rico. Temperatures above 100 near Ponce on the south coast, but right on the northeastern fringe of Puerto Rico we've had some passing rain showers, but as best we can tell looking at the radar throughout the day, it hasn't been very significant. Radar did estimate 4 to 6 inches of rain scattered about both the U.S. and the British Virgin Islands. Upper winds as of early this morning indicating a very light flow aloft, so no shearing of any significance anyway. And the system actually does have somewhat favorable characteristics on its eastern side. The outflow, or the air flowing out away from the hurricane center, is doing that pretty effectively, and that actually allows for a continuation to some extent of the lowering of the surface pressure. So those two working together in tandem, the air can continue to flow in and rise up, but once it gets to the top of the column, it's got to be able to spread out horizontally too, because if it can't spread out fast enough, there's kind of a backlog effect here, and then down to the surface we don't get the dramatic inflow that we would find with an intensifying hurricane. But there's some good outflow aloft, as we say, with the system, especially on its eastern side, or its eastern half. You'll notice as we head out west of here, light northerly winds prevailing over the Gulf of Mexico. There's a surface, or an old cold front underneath that, and we're still watching down here, well east of the islands. We do have another area of showers and thunderstorms. Unfortunately, visible imagery now no longer showing us a lot because it's just too dark. The sun starting to set here in this part of the Atlantic, so we don't get the illumination. But we did notice today a definite increase in the cloud canopy, and apparently perhaps a little more organization to the showers and the thunderstorms with that area of lower pressure. Off the coast of Africa, not much significance here to the cloud motion or the areas, but you can out of San Juan, Puerto Rico, and as we head to the northwest side of the island around Aguadilla, and then coming off towards the east, all along the north coast, the eastern coast, and then on the north-facing coasts of the the Virgin Islands. That's where the flood warnings are in effect. We don't have any problems around the south side of either Vieques or Culebra Islands, but the north-facing coasts are the ones that will be facing the brunt of the water slapping on in.
Okay. A look at our satellite view shows that it certainly is a little more impressive than it was earlier today.
Oh yeah, definitely. And if you look at the satellite picture here, even in the last hour, you know, one thing, earlier there was a tendency to see the greatest rising air motion, the convection occurring northeast of the center, but now we're getting the effect here of kind of both east and western quadrants getting involved in this. So it does appear to be a system that is intent on future, or further, I should say, intensification. But thank goodness it continues this north-northwesterly jog at this point in time.